How's it going, everybody, and welcome to episode 334 Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week's episode, we're looking at the topic of conifers and kind of taking a relook or rethinking what maybe our perception is of conifers. So, it's something that I noticed in myself recently, that conifers and certain conifers are catching my eye a little bit, and they wouldn't have before. And a couple of weeks ago, when we had Alma from the poppy garden on, she mentioned conifer. I think it was a Korean pine, if memory serves me correctly. But just even bloom, looking at pictures from Chelsea, looking at some designers recently, there's some conifers that are really, they're changing my perception of conifers in general. So that's kind of the topic we're going to cover this week. And yeah, we're obviously going to talk about the huge change and difference in our weather from last Friday to this. So lots to talk about and lots of interesting things to chat about. Before we do that, I mentioned for this week's sponsor, which is Crann from Probio Carbon. Now, Crann, if you remember back to the program on RTE on homegrown, so it was mentioned on that in relation to Buxus blight and how good it has been in the treatment of that. I've, as I say, used it previously on Portuguese laurel. I've applied it. It's 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago? No, it's actually only 10 days ago now since I applied it, and I'm already seeing really vigorous growth in the Portuguese laurel. So definitely going to hit it with another one. But it's a mix of Bacillus subtilis and Pseudomonas, and they are live microbes. They basically help the plant in lots of ways. So they produce a hormone response, which drives out plant growth, makes the plant more resilient and healthy. It makes nitrogen bioavailable. It attaches to the root zone, which makes iron available to the plant. It's a natural fungicide against things like botrytis, pythium, fusarium, and all of those things. And when you apply it, it stays with the plant. So it's a really beneficial microbe that will stay with the plant through all stages. Can be used on all plants. I use it on my tomatoes, I use it on my apple trees, a lot of my vegetable beds, and yeah, multifunctional. Used a lot in the bonsai world, but it's a really great product. You'll find that and the biochar, another very good product from ProBioCarbon on www.probiocarbon.ie. I'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. But a great product and one that I have used and believe in myself. Uh, so now let's get into. Firstly, let's chat about the weather. As I said, huge change in the course of a week. And last week, I suppose it went from being kind of cold. 2 weeks ago, if you went back 2.5, 3 weeks ago, it was cold. There was some rain, not a huge amount, but there was some days of rain, and it went from being cold to being 30 degrees Celsius here in the space of a couple of days. And again, I've mentioned it before in relation to changes like that. Anything that changes the, you know, the temperature upwards or downwards by those huge amounts in short spaces of time isn't good for plant growth. And yeah, last week we had those searing hot temperatures. I know a lot of people had seedlings and plants that got burnt in tunnels and in propagation benches, and just because temperatures in a greenhouse can get up so high, they just got singed. And I know because I've seen the videos of people and the pictures of people starting again sowing seeds. And that can happen when you get that huge surge of temperature all of a sudden. This week has brought it all back down to earth in a bang. Lots of rain here in Ireland, a lot of wind, and a lot of damaging wind at this stage of the year because you have a lot of leaf growth, a lot of soft growth on things, perennials and things. And so you're getting this wind, you're getting this wind on leaves on plants which have a good bit of leaf on them, so that they're catching the wind and they're getting blown around and battered around. There's heavy rain as well coming with that, and yeah, that's not great conditions for the lovely, lovely soft growth that we would have seen as a result of the temperatures last week. So there's that element of it. You have flowers and tender plants getting battered and blown around. There's that element, as I say. The other thing, and something that I've noticed here, and I know that others have had the same issue because, again, they've sent messages and whatnot. For me, in the polytunnel, particularly, as I said, those temperatures in the polytunnel greenhouse can hit and were hitting last week, 40 degrees Celsius. And I have in there, they weren't quite ready, but onions, garlic, leeks, none of them were fully ready. They were all doing quite well. The the spring, funny enough, even though it was a bad spring generally, but inside in the polytunnel, they were growing nice and steady, nice and slowly. They were getting, they were that bit warmer than outside, and they were just growing nice and steady, as I said. And they were coming along lovely. And then last week they just got hit with that, 40 degrees overnight. And what has happened now is a lot of them, a lot of them now are starting to bolt. So they're putting on that, the seed stock on them. And that's as a result of that huge surge in temperature last week. So it's not it's not a major problem. What I'll end up doing, say for example on the onions, they'll get harvested and eaten pretty much straight away as fresh onions. They're a lot smaller than I would typically be harvesting from the tunnel. The garlic is the same. They'll be used now as fresh garlic, but again, they haven't fully formed. They're nearly there. Another couple of weeks really would have seen them reach maturity. But they've all started to bolt up now. So that's something that has happened. You will notice the same thing outside as well, particularly if beds got dry during that warm period. If they had any period where they were drying out and then you were hitting them with water, that fluctuating in moisture levels, in temperatures will cause a shock, and that shock in turn causes the bolting or the running to seed. So that's something that I've definitely noticed here. Slugs this week, particularly really prevalent. Snails, I've never seen as many snails out this week. In fact, my youngest had a snail farm on the go right at the back door the other day, and she must have had 15 or 20 snails in it. They just seemed to come out overnight. Once that warm weather was there, and then you got the rain to go with it. Ideal conditions. It's also going to be ideal conditions for potato blight, so watch out for that. And the other thing that is, relevant in terms of the weather and potato blight is obviously it's blight type weather now. But also those really warm temperatures last week, you had this really soft growth, as I say. Those plants, even potato plants, would have been getting blown around a bit. They'll have soft growth on them. There might be a little bit of damage on them. And then the blight conditions come, and sometimes they can get really susceptible really quick because they just are soft. They've had that little bit of damage maybe from the wind or whatnot. So just be really vigilant of your potatoes outside, particularly over the next couple of weeks, because that blight is going to be very, very prevalent. Other thing, bloom last weekend. A good few of you came up and said hello. The two talks on Saturday, so I forget the times now, like 10 or half 10 for half an hour, and then another one at 12 or half 12 for half an hour. Brilliant turnout at both. Really went really well. It was a different layout to what I'd seen the last time at the Eat Well Garden. So there was actually a seating area this year, and there was, an area at the table. But it was the same principle in the Eat Well Garden at the Polytunnel. A nice crowd for both. Really happy with the turnout. Loads of questions. Very interactive. Met some lovely people from various parts of the country, and a good few listeners of the podcast came up and said hello as well, which I'm delighted with. So yeah, went really well. First time speaking there, so kind of happy with that. And hopefully, I think yeah, the people from Bloom anyway said they were very happy with it, so that's all good. And yeah, it was an enjoyable day. Funny enough, I didn't actually get because of the timings of it. I got there, 9 o'clock, got set up, got to my area, um, met Klaus Littenberger, who was kind of running that area, and yeah, done my first talk at 10 or half 10, whatever it was, second one at 12, half 12. There's a lot of questions afterwards, so it was probably like 2 o'clock before I got away from that area at all. Um, then went and did a little bit of a tour around, but we had to shoot away at about 4 o'clock because I had to get home for a couple of reasons. And so I didn't actually get to see a huge amount of the show overall. I got to see little bits and pieces, but didn't get to see a huge amount of it. So yeah, kind of was planning to go back on the Monday, and then it was lashing rain, and it was due to rain all day, so I didn't actually head back up after. But yeah, nice day out. Enjoyed the talk. Loved meeting a few of you guys, listeners, and yeah, it was a good experience for first time speaking at Bloom. Um, so what we're talking about this week is conifers, and I suppose a lot of us will think of conifers, and I know I certainly would have thought of conifers as being kind of old-fashioned. Now, there is some beautiful ones and ones I've mentioned loads of times on the podcast before. But if you think of conifers generally, they had their kind of period where everybody planted them everywhere in the garden. If you went back sort of 25 years ago, 30 years ago, conifers were the plant. And when somebody was planting up a big flower bed, they were planted up predominantly with conifers. And you get all the various colors, the various styles, and they were planted and then they grew and then they were cut into domes or cones or whatever. And they're still that way X amount of years later. Or they got too big, someone tried to cut them back, then they were brown on the inside, so then they got cut out. And they have been known to be, I think at that time what happened was they were very much overused. So as I say, somebody doing a bed, a mixed bed, they went heavy on the conifers at that time because they were all in, they were in vogue. There was, probably they were probably new to, I suppose, new to people or relatively new to people at that stage. Then they got overused, and I think that tends to happen generally speaking. Anyway, everything goes through phases, and then things settle down. So it's definitely, I suppose, when I look at conifers or looked at conifers, you can picture them in the gardens of houses that were built sort of 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and you have these big conifer balls or these big conifer cones or odd shapes, and they're just cut and tidied and trimmed, but there's not much about them. So that's kind of, I suppose, in the back of my mind when it comes to conifers. Having said that, over the last, I suppose, couple of years, and particularly over the last 6 months, there's certain conifers that I look at and they're phenomenal, but not conifers are best if they're used sparingly and are used in, certainly as specimen pieces as well. They can be absolutely phenomenal, but certain conifers in the right place, not overdone, and I think they can look absolutely brilliant. I'm going to go through a list of about 10. It's certainly not the definitive list. There is so many new ones coming on now. I've seen some beautiful ones. I've seen a beautiful ABs with, I think it was called strawberry head or AB strawberry tree or something like that. But basically, it was a miniature ABs with little red tips on it that looked for all the world like strawberries. So had the conifer leaf or needle, and then right on the tips of all the growing tips was a really vibrant red pine or a little vibrant red needle head on it. And that's where the name obviously came from, strawberry head. It looks amazing. So, there's some beautiful ones coming out, new cultivars, new varieties, and yeah, it's, I suppose, after, as I say, I suppose forcing me to look at them in a slightly different light. So I'm going to go through 10 that might make us rethink conifers. Some of these I've mentioned, as I said before, and some of them are actually old-fashioned ones, but when used correctly, they can be brilliant. So I'll go through the list. First one is Pinus mugo, and there's loads of different varieties of this, but it grows, relatively small. It's meter-ish in size, meter to a meter and a half at max, but it's a really standout, really nice pinus or pine, and there's loads of varieties. Winter gold is a very good one, really gold colored pine leaf on or needle on it, and that looks brilliant. And that's one that definitely would be worthy of any garden. Pines in general I find to be kind of very nice, and especially as a specimen. Talk about another one later on, but as a specimen, yeah, they do. They kind of stand out. Um, number two on the list is Cedrus deodora. This is an old-fashioned one in that it was all in vogue 20 years ago. Loads of gardens were planting them. Then they kind of fell out a little bit. But if you look at them, any of them now that are mature, a deodora will grow to a big tree, like 15 foot or 15 meters, maybe even 20 meters. It has, the kind of pyramid type shape, layered tree, gorgeous color, that kind of bluey color on it, and it's a brilliant tree. It's also available in a pendula, so a weeping version of the same thing. Don't like that as much. I find that a little bit, I don't know, what would you say, a bit not. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look like it should. Whereas the Cedrus deodora is a fantastic tree. Uh, Classy. Definitely has been, it's one that was planted a lot years ago and is definitely not being planted as much now. But if you look at those mature ones now, they're absolutely gorgeous trees, and one that, in time will really become a fantastic tree in your garden. Does need a bit of space, as I say, it can go up to 15 or 20 meters, but a very nice tree. Next one on the list is Meta Sequoia, Dawn Redwood. This is not for a small garden. This is one that's going to be, 15 meters up to 30 meters in size. The autumn color is spectacular on it. And again, it needs a lot of space. It's a redwood, so it is, it's along the lines of the big giant redwoods that are among the biggest trees in the world. So it's in that family, so you can imagine it's going to be a big tree. But Metasquia, Dawn redwood grows, generally speaking, in most soils and has fantastic autumn color. And that's a tree, as I say, worthy of any garden. Next one on the list is Scots pine. It's native Irish, um, or one of our native trees. I know it's also native to other parts of the world, but definitely here, it's a fantastic tree. Not really a garden tree, more of a field or an estate tree, but it's a fantastic tree. It's the only native on the list in terms of conifers, but a really fantastic one. Next one on the list I've mentioned before, but in relation to hedging, I guess, and it's Taxus baccata. And to me, it is the classiest evergreen hedge that you can have. It is beautiful leaf, always good color on it, um, really dense and thick, and it looks classy. It's a classy hedge, and it's definitely my favorite evergreen hedge, I would think. I've used a little bit recently. I've used the likes of Taxus baccata balls instead of using Buxus balls, and they look superb as well. So it's a brilliant hedge, or a brilliant as a specimen plant. So in a ball shape or a cone shape. There's a people doing kind of big columns, like they look like big square columns. They look absolutely amazing in Taxus baccata. So another one, another really good one. Next on the list is one that's definitely old-fashioned, but it's still a good one. And I passed by a garden in Wexford there a couple of weeks ago, and they had them standing all along the front of the house. So they had a hedge and right, or they had a fence, and right behind the fence they had these planted, not in a hedge as such, but more creating a bit of screening. And it's Tuia orientalis smargold. And how would you describe them? On this garden, when you drove, the garden was way up above the road. It was on a hill, and they had these planted all along at kind of 2 meter spacings behind the fence. And they looked for all the world like soldiers guarding the fence. They were just big, stately, tall columns, uh, slightly tapered at the top, and they just looked really well. Again, these have been planted a lot over the years, and generally they get overdone, or they get allowed to grow into a bit of a mess. But when they're kept right and planted in a nice way, in the nice setting, they kind of just, yeah, they really do what they're supposed to do. And that looked really good. It was yeah, it was hard to describe it, but it was high, it was above the road. It wasn't a full thick hedge, but it was creating a division. You couldn't see the house. They were, as I say, like soldiers guarding the fence. It looked really well. So that's another one, Tui Orientalis Smargold. The next one is Cryptomeria japonica. That's again one Cryptomeria. There's loads of really interesting and nice Cryptomerias. I find that some of them look a little bit untidy, or quite a lot of them actually look untidy, I think. But Cryptomeria japonica, that looks nice, has a nice, relatively nice shape on it. But some of them, as I say, they look a little bit scraggy, and yeah, I wouldn't love them, but that particular one is very, very nice. There's another one, Pisia AB's Little Gem. So it's an AB's again, in Little Gem. That one is nice. It's small, suitable for a small garden. And I suppose something to note with all of the conifers really is that they generally speaking will prefer drier soil, and they'll grow in most conditions in terms of hardiness, in terms of wind, but just they don't want wet feet. They don't like to sit in water. Generally speaking, conifers by their nature, they're plants that grow between rocks on the sides of hills, generally at higher altitude. That's broadly speaking their sort of natural home. So you don't want to have them sitting in anything that's heavy waterlogged soil. They don't want that at all. But other than that, they grow almost anywhere. Another nice one is Podocarpus nivalis. A very, very good, very similar in a way to Taxus baccata in that it can be clipped really, really tight, can stay really full, grows as can grow as a hedge, can be shaped into balls and cones and things like that. So that's a really good one. Podocarpus nivalis. It's not one that you'll see very often, but it is a very, very good plant and a very, very good conifer. And there's loads like that's kind of 10, I think, conifers that are worth a look. I'll run over the list again and then I'll give you a few other notable ones. So Pinus mugo, um, Podocarpus nivalis, Cedrus theodora, very good one. Um, when you're planting Cedrus theodora, it won't look anything exciting or anything great to look at. But if you look at that in 20 years' time or 30 years' time, it creates a fine tree. It really does. Metasquiadon redwood, that's big. You need to give that the space. Scots pine, one of my favorite trees, a native tree, not really a garden tree, but a brilliant tree. And Pinus nigra bambino. Actually, I hadn't mentioned that one. Pinus nigra bambino. That's one now that I'm seeing a lot. So it's the Austrian dwarf pine. And that's one that I'm seeing a lot being used as specimen plants in, sort of show gardens and so on. And they look fantastic. So you have all the lower stems and so on pruned off, and you end up with this kind of pine tree, but in a with a big head, like maybe a meter wide of a head, and then a little short stem on it, and it just looks class. So Pinus nigra bambino, which is the Austrian dwarf pine. That's one, as I say, look that up. It's a really gorgeous, gorgeous kind of specimen tree. Other ones on the list then that we mentioned: Taxus baccata, Tuia orientalis marigold, Cryptomeria japonica, Picea abes, little gem, and other notable mentions then for the larch tree, which beautiful tree as well. It does drop its needles in the winter time. One that was overused so much back in the noughties or even the 90s was juniper blue star. Every garden in the country had a juniper blue star at one point in time. Completely overdone. People got sick of them. But in if you look at it on its own and forget about its overuse, it's actually a really interesting looking plant. That bluey kind of bluey grey kind of hint on the needles. So it's a really beautiful plant, but as I say, it got a bit overused, and as a result, people maybe fell out of love with it a little bit. And there's lots of other Tuia plicata, loads of Pinus sylvestris, um, loads of cryptomerias, loads of chamiciferous. You get the spirals, the prune spirals of chamiciferous. There's so many interesting ones. And I suppose the purpose of the episode was just to kind of have a rethink. I think I'm right in saying I don't have a single conifer in the garden, do I? I've one Taxus baccata cone. That's it. Um, so there's definitely merit for some. There's some beautiful ones in it. There's some of them that have been completely overused in the past. Conifers in general, where people planted a whole bed of conifers and nothing else in it, and then left it grow, and then a few years later, it's just everything's grown into each other, everything's overgrown. Yeah, and they lose their appeal when they're planted in that way. But individually, they're really interesting plants, and they're suitable. You can have them for really small gardens, you can have them for pots, and you can have the really big metasequoias and so on. So there's something for kind of every garden, and there's an interest for every garden within conifers, so long as they're not overused and put all together. So yeah, just kind of to highlight that and to rethink, I suppose, to rethink conifers as a worthwhile plant for the garden. Some of the nurseries in Ireland have great selections of them, and you get them in all the various sizes. But yeah, as I say, recently I've been just looking at them, especially the likes of the Prunus nigra, and the likes of those just look fantastic and interesting, stand out, and really nice specimen trees or plants. So that's what's caught my eye, and I just think they're kind of worth a rethink. I'd say they probably are making a little bit of a comeback, because you just notice that the garden centres have given over more space to them over, say, the last year or two. There was probably a point in time there where conifers, if you went back 30 years ago, maybe half the garden centre would have been conifers. But now, and then there was a period where they were stuck in a corner because nobody wanted them. But there seems to be more of them now, and different varieties and new interesting ones coming along. Like I mentioned, that ABs with this, I think it's kind of strawberry tree or strawberry something or other. Really interesting one. So there is lots coming, and definitely worth a rethink, as the idea was to start that episode. Anything else that's happening this week? Let me see. Buds and Blossoms is on this Sunday, the 7th, so Sunday, the 7th of June. I mentioned that in the episode last Saturday that it's on. We have speakers there's Edward Hayden, celebrity chef. He's going to be speaking there. Kieran Fitzgerald, head gardener of Johnstown Castle, and all the work that they're doing down there. Darren McCullough of Elm Grove Farm, the biggest daffodil farm, I think, in the country. Also, he was at Bloom last week, so a busy man at Bloom. Beautiful stand of peony roses there. So yeah, I'm sure he was he had a very, very busy weekend up there, and yeah, back in Spink this Sunday. As I mentioned, there is a whole host of events on the Saturday, so check out Leash Garden Festival, and gates open on Sunday from 12 p.m. I presume the first speaker is kind of at 1 o'clock or thereabouts. Lots of nurseries there, lots of other gardening equipment and arches and all of that sort of thing. So loads at the Spink Garden Festival, or the Buds and Blossoms Garden Festival in Spink Community Grounds, and that's on Sunday the 7th. So yeah, quick episode, just rethinking conifers and mentioning those huge fluctuations in temperatures. We're looking ahead to the next week of kind of similar, unsettled, little bit of rain, reasonably high temperatures, not bits of sunshine, and very changeable. As somebody said the other day, after 2 days or 2 or 3 days of the really good weather, that's it now for another year. And hopefully that's not the case. So yeah, hopefully we see more good weather in the coming weeks. But anyway, for now, that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening. Until the next time, happy gardening.